Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Norbert Altenstad, Sales and Marketing Manager for Just.is, and I will be your host for another episode of Taking Stock, Talking All Things Retail, a podcast about retail technology in an omnichannel world. Today's guest is Brian Sullivan, the owner of Kalex Equipment Services and former president and CEO of NCR Canada. Brian is a retail industry veteran with over 2 decades of ERP consulting experience with specific expertise in store systems. Today's topic of conversation will revolve around how to accelerate your brand's digital transformation through retail disruption. Brian, you've helped leading retailers like Saks Fifth Avenue, Hudson Bay, and Harry Rosen develop omnichannel strategies and even implement technology systems. Can you share your view on what retailers need to do now to adapt and accelerate their digital transformation in the midst of retail disruption?
Well, the retail disruption, Norbert, has been disconcerting for so many businesses. And during that period, of course, it was a hurry up and get it done. Hurry up and make the changes necessary to support the new methods by which consumers were coming to them. The shutdowns themselves, the business shutdowns, were very much causing organizations to change their focus, lose their focus potentially, and acquire new skill sets needed to now accommodate the way in which the consumer came to them. However, post-COVID, if we can start using that expression, post-pandemic, there will be a rampant need for realignment of how in which we deal with customers, how in which those customers come to us to purchase products and services. And of course, in doing that, all those hurry up initiatives that happened over the last 18 months now need to be incorporated, now need to be folded into a vision for what the new world of retail merchandising will look like. And that's a challenge. That'll be a challenge for most organizations who couldn't have predicted in their vision that such a massive worldwide disruption would have occurred. It's not just the normal touch point where we would expect to see our consumers interacting with a retail associate, but it's the way in which they're going to be engaging from a product searching, from purchasing, from delivery perspective, all those unique channels having evolved. But the reality that the Amazons of the world have changed the way in which we acquire goods and services, the speed at which we acquire goods and services, and the direct relationship with those manufacturers / distributors.
Right.
Does that make their retail storefront obsolete? I don't think so. However, there's some realities in that change that need to be addressed.
Well, the alignment of the vision and technology strategies of so many companies really comes down to, the rollout planning for a retail business, that for any retail business considering change. Can you talk about your experience when it comes to rollout planning and how companies can really, affect change when it comes to software, hardware, infrastructure, or even processes within their organization?
Well, that's a mouthful for sure. And it's something that you almost have to take one bite of the elephant at a time. But
right.
Backing up from going into it from a planning perspective, there's the 3 A's. Is it achievable? Is it achievable from the standpoint of a reasonable timeline and expense to go along with whatever the initiative is? Is there alignment? Is there alignment between the information technology group and the business itself? And is it supported with a vision and future state consideration that they're working towards? And of course, is there agreement? And the agreement ultimately means the organization's agreement that the future state vision is agreed on by the executive, by the deployment component of the organization, and so forth. And those are all big challenges. it's not that people weren't organizations, not people, but organizations and their people weren't doing it previously. It just means the size, the scope of what needs to be accomplished in the coming years has changed dramatically.
Right. So at the end of the day, it really is, adapting their systems and processes to meet the heightened customer demands, and mobility and cybersecurity are some of the main challenges so many retailers are going through their digital transformation. Can you maybe just talk about the mobility and cybersecurity?
Love to. But those requirements were there pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
The cybersecurity and the mobility piece were already initiatives that most organizations were very well schooled in, and had initiatives within their organization to continue to hone their expertise in those areas. What changes going ahead here is the channels of distribution, the touch points, the customer engagement piece, cybersecurity pieces, or mobile components to go along with that. Look at our own habits, the number of times you pay with contactless payment. In the past, it might have been, a number of times a week, depending on, the way in which the card was being accepted by the retailer, but the limits were increased. The number of contact touch payments per diem has increased 20-fold. And it has now become realistically an accepted way of payment that the consumer takes for granted, the retailer takes for granted, the bank now takes as an accepted methodology based upon the associated proven risk in those specific areas. So those are all good things. Those are all very positive things that came out of the pandemic in terms of streamlining businesses to manage and handle those changed areas.
And all of that is the net result of the increase in online and e-commerce buying, and certainly the Amazon effect, but certainly the pandemic has all played such a huge role in forcing the hand of so many retailers to really reconsider their digital transformation to adapt to current buying behaviors.
Absolutely agreed. And in the past, where you could say, well, we'll defer that project because it's not mission critical, it's not aligned with our current business needs. The reality is that it was an absolute necessity. It was the same level of necessity that heat and light is, or that systems management is, or whatever corollary you want to add to that. The reality is it had to be done.
Yeah, so now it's really a tactical versus a strategic decision. So many IT resources or companies need to consider in how they approach their transformation, right?
That's a really good breakdown between tactical and strategic. And I think we can pretty well, put up the sign above the last 18 months that it was all tactical.
Yeah.
That, we did what we needed to do to survive. It was bail the boat, keep rowing. and now, of course, you have to move to strategic. What has your business evolved into during this period? What were the positives? Where did we see growth? Where did we see business benefit? How can we continue to use those in this omni-channel world going ahead, from learning from not only our own practices, but the practices of others, the best in class in that space? And alignment in that area is critical. Measurement in that area is critical. And establishing, an initial self-assessment at this particular point in time is probably a real important reality check for most organizations, to look at who did we become, who did we morph into during this period, and how are we going to leverage those initiatives going forward in time, because quite frankly, they've been valuable to our business. And that's the glass half full version of the world. I recognize, but it's still an important way to look at it.
And the overarching challenge in many cases is supply chain. Supply chain has completely changed. It's come to the forefront of everyone's need to be able to fulfill and ship, through omnichannel sources, to have a unified commerce platform just to support the current supply chain models.
Agreed. And it's the compressed supply chain view of it that I think we need to acknowledge. The time at which we move from demand and associated manufacturing from that demand has been affected by so many things. But let's say going ahead here, those things mean that there's a closer relationship between the point of purchase, the point of items moving from the retail outlet or the distribution outlet to the consumer, and the manufacturing time has greatly compressed and will continue to compress. And it's compressed as a result of visibility, it's compressed as a result of knowing your customer better, and ultimately knowing what value that the merchant adds to the particular product as a result of supplying it to the consumer in a form that's now acceptable to them. 24-hour delivery,
yep.
Amazon Prime, Uber delivery. I see a client up on your slide here, Harry Rosen's, of course, who delivers purchased items, whether it be through an associate over the phone or online through Uber, because the consumer, we recognize as consumers, we want it right away. I made a decision to pay for it. I made a decision to buy it. I need it for a particular occasion, and I want it this afternoon. And so the supply chain and the provision to be able to provide that is obviously compressed. And then at the manufacturing end, the visibility that manufacturers now have on movement of items and so forth is also compressed. Those are realities that I think are business benefits, but the realities that the merchant now needs to accommodate in terms of how they buy, how they procure, how they forecast, and how they can easily, and perhaps seamlessly is an important word there, make changes to that.
And so, I mean, it brings the question, how important is agility and change management within an organization? So many companies through this, the digital transformation find themselves not having the flexibility, the internal agility, or even the mindset for change management to adapt to required change.
Well, the race is always to the fastest foot. And that's been true. That's been true not during the last period, but for as long as I can remember. Those organizations that are agile, those organizations that are nimble, those organizations that can reinvent themselves as their demographic changes, as their locations change, as their method of supply to their various consumers changes, are the ones that win. Mm-hmm. The ones that stay to current practices without looking to evolve and so forth are going to suffer, and they're going to be outstripped, outrun. Laws of the jungle here. They'll be outrun by their competition. So, and I think that's we're not telling people something they don't know. Those have always been realities. It's the application of the technology to help support those changes and to make them more nimble that gives organizations a competitive edge.
Yeah, I mean, clearly, Brian, you've got so many success stories, and your expertise in this area is, quite frankly, second to none. Is there any final advice that you could maybe give any kind of a retailer out there regarding yourself, their business process, to help with this digital transformation?
Yeah, I think the self-assessment in terms of really making some pertinent, defined observations around where are you at in terms of your own state of maturity. How have you evolved, and how will you now deal with establishing what changes need to be implemented, what pain points exist, and what your future state should look like. Big sentence. But in doing that, I think the important piece, the key piece, is to ensure that you've established a level of fluidity. In other words, the changes haven't stopped. And so you can't really enter into a self-assessment and future state planning initiative, consulting initiative, without recognizing that it needs to be continuously cultivated. The attention to the garden always needs to continue. And being fluid means that your customers' habits will change, the products that you supply will change, all the supporting services around how you add value to those products will continue to change. So you're planning, in terms of moving forward to those systems that are going to help you establish and realize those benefits need to be fluid. And the way in which you do that is to thoroughly define KPIs, measure, remeasure, socialize the vision statement in your organization so that you're really effectively trying to get all on the same page. And be prepared to change. It will change. And a 5-year vision or a 7-year vision was the de facto standard for most organizations. Honestly, I don't believe you can do more than 2 years today, knowing that you have to look to what you can actually execute from the size of the elephant perspective, and then how can you continue to measure and manage that so you're realizing the benefits. So self-assessment, moving to a fluid position, and then of course interlock with the business relative to the established KPIs. Is there an ROI associated with all the initiatives we're putting through, and who's measuring it, and how are we continuing to communicate that to our customers? Those tribal beliefs, if you will, become realized very quickly through organizations understanding where we're going, how we're going to get there, what things do we expect to change on route.
Absolutely. The realistic planning, aligning your vision with your technology stack, and then measuring those results and staying on top of things to make the necessary adjustments.
Norbert, to go along, of course, with the process and direction that organizations need to take, it's really the how-to that most organizations are looking for. To look at your own internal organizations and the resources within that organization is sort of one half of the pie. The other half of the pie is really an understanding of what others are doing in that from that viewpoint, from an initiative, from a deployment, from a return of investment on transformations that have taken place. And the way in which you should look to do that is to consult with your partners, consult with your vendor relationships, because they have the good fortune of being cross-pollinated with so many other organizations in terms of what worked for them, what didn't work for them. It took this long to deploy this particular way of doing distribution or home delivery or whatever it might be. And that's a great area to start in terms of those organizations that have survived well through this period, and look to them in terms of this multi-pronged input for how to really reap the benefits of the changes that are forthcoming. And I certainly encourage your listeners to look to their partners, look to their vendors, look to their existing relationships to better understand the market at large, versus simply considering how did we do things, what changed, and what are we going to do going forward to accommodate those changes. And that would be the final note that I would like to leave on, is there's a great resource there, there's a very willing resource there that is prepared to invest time with your organizations.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, communication, collaboration, consultation, and at the end is that will create the transparency and the needed solutions that you need to execute change within an organization. Thank you, Brian, for today's chat. If you or valued listeners have any follow-up questions, we'll be happy to answer them for you. Please leave a comment below or send us an email at sales@gestais.com, and we'll be happy to answer them. Thank you once again for listening to How to Accelerate Your Brand's Digital Transformation Through Retail Disruption, and we look forward to having you as a guest on one of our next podcasts.